Thessaly Vaughan was declared dead 5 years ago. Her father held a funeral, wept before hundreds of mourners, and buried an empty coffin beneath the willow trees of their ancestral estate. The kingdom grieved for the lost daughter of a noble house, but Thessaly wasn't dead. She was beneath the floor, hidden in a cellar no one knew existed, kept alive but erased from the world. She had become her father's darkest secret. For 5 years she heard footsteps above her, heard laughter and music and life continuing without her. She had stopped screaming long ago. No one could hear her. No one even remembered to listen. Then Alpha King Rennick came to inspect his newly acquired territory. He walked through the grand halls of the Vaughan estate, accepting tributes and false smiles, until he stopped in the middle of the great room and tilted his head. "There's a heartbeat beneath this floor," he said. Everyone froze. Within the hour, he had torn through the stone himself, pulled a half-wild woman from the darkness, and looked into eyes that had forgotten what sunlight meant. He took her, not out of kindness, not out of love. He took her because she was useful, because her existence meant her father had lied, and because lies could be leveraged. He made his terms clear from the start. She would be his wife in name. She would help him destroy her father. And in return, he would never love her. He would never even try. Neither of them understood how impossible that promise would be. The darkness had become Thessaly's only companion. She no longer remembered what the sun felt like on her skin, or how grass smelled after rain, or the sound of her own name spoken with affection. 5 years in a cellar beneath her family's estate had stripped those memories away, leaving only the cold, the damp, and the endless silence. The space was barely large enough to lie down. Stone walls pressed close on every side, slick with moisture that never dried. A thin mattress, rotted and stained, served as her bed. A bucket in the corner served as everything else. Once a day, sometimes twice if she was fortunate, a slot in the ceiling would open and food would drop down. Stale bread, watered soup, just enough to keep her alive, never enough to give her strength to escape. Thessaly had screamed for the first year, clawed at the walls until her fingers bled, begged until her voice broke, and never fully healed. But the cellar was buried deep beneath the east wing, hidden behind false walls and forgotten corridors. No one heard her. Or if they did, they had been ordered not to care. Her father had made certain of that. She pressed her palm against the cold stone above her, feeling the vibrations of footsteps. There were many today, more than usual. Heavy boots instead of servants' soft shoes. Voices she didn't recognize, deep and commanding, speaking in tones that demanded obedience. Something was different. Thessaly's heart, long accustomed to its slow, defeated rhythm, began to beat faster. She pressed her ear to the ceiling, straining to hear. "The estate is impressive," a male voice said. Cold, detached, utterly without warmth. "Though I expected more from a house that claims such ancient lineage." "Your Majesty, I assure you, the Vaughan family has served the crown faithfully for generations." Her father's voice. Thessaly would know it anywhere, that smooth, practiced tone that could convince anyone of anything. "We are honored beyond measure by your visit." "Your Majesty." The words sent ice through her veins. The Alpha King was here, in her father's house, walking above her prison. She had heard rumors before her imprisonment, whispered stories of the young king who had seized the throne through blood and strategy. Rennick of Valdris, they called him. The Winter Wolf, a man so cold that even his allies feared him. And he was standing directly above her. Thessaly held her breath, pressing harder against the stone. The footsteps continued, moving through the room. Then they stopped. Silence. A terrible, stretching silence that made her skin prickle with something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. "Lord Vaughan," the cold voice said, and even through the stone, Thessaly could hear the danger in it. "Why is there a heartbeat beneath your floor?" Everything went still. Thessaly's own heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it, certain he was hearing it right now, tracking the sound like a predator tracking prey. I don't understand your meaning, Your Majesty, her father stammered. I hear a heartbeat. Beneath the stone. Slow. Weak. A pause. Human. That's impossible. There's nothing beneath this room. The foundations are solid, I assure you. You're lying to me. The words were quiet, almost gentle, but they carried the weight of absolute authority. Thessaly heard movement, heard her father's sharp intake of breath, and heard other voices murmuring in confusion. Then came the sound of stone cracking. She scrambled backward, pressing against the far wall as dust rained down from above. Another crack. Another. Light pierced through the darkness, thin golden beams that made her eyes burn and water. She covered her face, sobbing at the pain of it. The brightness she had forgotten existed. The ceiling shattered. And through the broken stone, silhouetted against blazing torchlight, stood a man who looked like winter given flesh. Pale hair falling past his shoulders, eyes the color of frozen lakes, a face carved from ice and angles, beautiful in the way a blade was beautiful. He stared down at her. Thessaly stared back, trembling, feral, and barely recognizable as the noblewoman she had once been. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then the Alpha King extended his hand. Come, he said. Thessaly didn't take his hand. She couldn't. Her body had forgotten how to trust, how to accept help without expecting pain. She pressed herself harder against the wall, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her eyes streaming from the light. The Alpha King didn't withdraw his offer. He simply waited, his expression unreadable, his hand steady in the air between them. Your Majesty. Her father's voice came from somewhere above, high and desperate. I can explain. The girl is dangerous, unstable. She had to be contained for her own safety. Contained. The word was flat. In a pit beneath your floor. For how long? Silence. How long, Lord Vorn? 5 years. Someone whispered. Not her father. A servant, perhaps, too shocked to stay silent. Thessaly watched the king's face. Something flickered in those frozen eyes, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. When he spoke again, his voice was colder than before. 5 years. He turned back to her, and this time when he extended his hand, he lowered himself to one knee, bringing himself closer to her level. I'm going to lift you out now. I will not hurt you. Do you understand? She didn't understand anything. Not why he was here. Not why he cared. Not why a king would kneel in the dirt for a creature like her. But his scent reached her through the dust and decay, pine and frost and something darker beneath, and her wolf stirred for the first time in years. Mate, it whispered. No, impossible. She was broken, ruined, and barely alive. She couldn't have a mate. She didn't deserve one. But when his hands closed around her waist, lifting her from the pit as if she weighed nothing, her wolf howled with recognition. Thessaly found herself standing in the great room of her childhood home, surrounded by shocked faces and fallen stone. Her legs buckled immediately. The king caught her before she hit the ground, one arm securing her against his chest. He was cold, so cold. His body radiated chill the way other wolves radiated heat, and even through her thin rags she could feel it seeping into her bones. She needs a healer, he said to no one in particular. Your Majesty, please. Her father stepped forward, his face a mask of concern that Thessaly knew too well. Let me care for my daughter. She's clearly unwell. The stress of her condition. Her condition. The king's voice could have frozen fire. You mean the condition of being buried alive beneath your own home? It was necessary. Nothing about this was necessary. Thessaly felt his arm tighten around her. She should have been afraid. She was afraid, but not of him. Not of the cold or the power or the danger radiating from his every pore. She was afraid of hope, of believing this rescue was real, of waking up and finding herself still in the darkness. "She belongs to me now," the king announced. The words rang through the hall like a death knell. Servants gasped. Her father went pale as snow. "Your Majesty, you cannot. I am the Alpha King of Valdris." His gaze swept the room, freezing every person it touched. "These are my lands now, Lord Vorn, acquired through your failure to pay your debts to the crown. Everything in this estate belongs to me, including your secrets." He looked down at Thessaly, still trembling in his arms. "Including her. She's my daughter. She was your daughter. Now she is my concern." He turned toward the door, carrying her as if she were made of glass. "My men will complete the inspection. You will cooperate fully. If I discover any more surprises, I will be far less understanding." Thessaly watched her father's face over the king's shoulder as they left, saw the hatred burning beneath the false grief, saw him calculating, planning, and searching for ways to destroy her even now. But she was leaving. For the first time in 5 years, she was leaving. The carriage was warm, heated by stones wrapped in cloth and piled on the floor. The king set her on the velvet seat across from him and wrapped a fur blanket around her shoulders without a word. Then he simply sat back and watched her. Thessaly pulled the blanket tighter, drowning in its softness. She couldn't remember the last time she had touched anything soft. Her throat worked, trying to form words, but her voice had atrophied along with everything else. "Drink." He handed her a water skin. When she struggled to open it with shaking hands, he took it back, uncapped it, and held it to her lips himself. She drank until she choked, water running down her chin, mixing with the tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "Slowly," he said. Still no warmth in his voice, but no cruelty either. Just cold, clinical efficiency. The carriage began to move. Thessaly watched through the window as her father's estate grew smaller, as the walls that had been her prison faded into the distance. "Why?" she rasped. Her voice sounded like gravel, broken and wrong. The king didn't pretend to misunderstand. "Because your father lied to me, because lies have consequences, because you are useful." "Useful. Your existence proves Lord Vorn committed fraud against the crown. He collected sympathy payments after your supposed death. He used your inheritance to pay gambling debts. The king stopped, studying her face. "You didn't know." She shook her head slowly. "Your father declared you dead to steal your birthright, your mother's fortune, your claim to the Eastern Territories." His eyes narrowed. "He buried you, so he could bury his crimes." Thessaly absorbed this, adding it to the mountain of betrayals she had always known, but never fully understood. Of course her father had a reason beyond hatred. Of course there was money involved, power, land. She had always been worth more to him dead than alive. "What will you do with me?" she whispered. The Alpha King leaned back against the velvet seat, his pale eyes reflecting the winter light streaming through the carriage window. "That depends entirely on you." 3 days passed before Thessaly felt human again. The king's castle was nothing like her father's estate. Where Vorn Manor had been all false warmth and hidden darkness, Thornhaven Keep was openly cold, but honestly so. Gray stone walls, minimal decoration, fires burning in every hearth, but somehow never warming the air completely. Or perhaps that was simply the king's influence. Thessaly had been given chambers larger than her entire childhood bedroom, staffed by servants who spoke softly and moved carefully, as if she were a wounded animal that might startle. She supposed she was. The healers had come and gone, murmuring about malnutrition and muscle atrophy and psychological damage that would take years to heal. She had bathed until the water ran clear, eaten until her shrunken stomach protested, slept in a bed so soft she woke convinced she was dreaming. On the 4th day, She was summoned to the king's study. Her legs still trembled when she walked, but she refused the servant's offered arm. She had been carried enough. She would stand on her own or collapse trying. The study was warmer than the rest of the castle, though still cold by any normal standard. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A massive desk dominated the center, covered in maps and documents and the organized chaos of a kingdom being run. And behind it sat the Alpha King himself, Rennick. She had learned his name from the servants. Rennick Ashford, third of his name, ruler of Valdris since the age of 19, when he had challenged his own uncle for the throne, and won. They spoke of him with fear and respect in equal measure. They said he had never taken a mate, never shown interest in any woman, and never displayed any emotion beyond cold calculation. Looking at him now, Thessaly believed it. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. She sat, folding her hands in her lap to hide their shaking. The dress they had given her was simple but well-made, dark blue wool that hung loose on her too thin frame. She felt like a child playing dress-up, pretending to be the noblewoman she had once been. "You look better," the king observed. "The healers say you'll make a full recovery. Physically, at least." "Thank you, Your Majesty." Her voice was still rough, but stronger. "For the healers, the rooms, the rescue?" His lips twitched, though it wasn't quite a smile. "Don't thank me yet. You don't know what I want from you." Thessaly straightened in her chair. She had spent the past 3 days preparing for this conversation, steeling herself for whatever he would demand. Labor, information, her body. Nothing could be worse than the cellar. Nothing. "Tell me," she said. The king studied her for a long moment, those frozen eyes cataloging every detail of her face. Then he reached into his desk and withdrew a document, sliding it across the surface toward her. "A marriage contract," he said, "between yourself and me." Thessaly stared at the paper, not touching it, certain she had misheard. "Marriage. Your father's territories are extensive and strategically vital. When I acquired them, the local lords protested. They claim the lands should have passed to you, his only surviving heir." His voice remained perfectly level, perfectly cold. "Marrying you would legitimize my claim beyond any dispute. It would also give me leverage to destroy your father completely, once I've gathered sufficient evidence of his crimes." "You want to marry me," Thessaly repeated slowly, "for political advantage." Yes. At least he was honest. She had expected pretty lies, false promises of affection. His blunt admission was almost refreshing. "What would I receive in return?" The king leaned back in his chair. "Safety, wealth, a title. The eventual satisfaction of watching your father face justice for what he did to you." He paused. "And my word that I will never hurt you, never imprison you, never treat you as anything less than a queen deserves. But you will never love me." The words came out before she could stop them, an echo of something she had been thinking since the carriage. He was offering her everything she had lost, everything she had never dared to dream of. Everything except the one thing she had stopped believing in long ago. The king's expression didn't change. "No, I will not. I am incapable of such things. It would be cruel to pretend otherwise. Incapable." The word rang strangely in her ears. Most men would have said unwilling, uninterested. But incapable suggested something else, something deeper. "You're asking me to accept a loveless marriage," Thessaly said carefully. "I'm asking you to accept a safe one." He leaned forward, and for just a moment something flickered in those frozen eyes. "You know what cruelty looks like, Lady Thessaly. You've lived with it for 5 years. I am offering you its opposite. Not warmth, perhaps, but not cruelty either. Not love, but not hatred. Simply cold." Cold over cruelty, Thessaly thought. She had made that bargain before, In her own mind, 1,000 times in the darkness, she would choose cold over cruelty every time. I accept, she said. The king blinked, the only sign of surprise he allowed himself. You don't wish to consider? To negotiate terms? What terms would I negotiate? Thessaly met his gaze steadily. I have nothing. No money, no allies, no strength. You've offered me more than I ever expected to have again. I would be foolish to refuse. Most women would require more assurances. Most women were not buried alive by their fathers. She reached for the contract, pulling it toward her. Where do I sign? For a long moment, the king simply stared at her. Then he handed her a pen, and Thessaly signed her name in letters that only shook slightly. She had barely set down the pen when the study doors burst open. Your Majesty. A guard stood in the doorway, breathless. Lord Vorn has arrived. He demands to see you. He claims the woman you took is dangerous, that she murdered her own mother and must be returned to his custody for— Let him in, the king interrupted calmly. Thessaly's blood turned to ice. She started to rise, to flee, to hide. But Rennick's voice stopped her. Stay exactly where you are. He didn't raise his voice, didn't look at her, but the command was absolute. You are my betrothed now. You will not cower before that man ever again. Her father swept into the room moments later, his face arranged in an expression of paternal concern that made Thessaly's stomach turn. Behind him came her younger sister, Corisande, beautiful and cold-eyed, watching everything with calculating interest. Your Majesty, her father began, I must protest this outrageous— Lord Vorn. The king's voice cut through the bluster like a blade through silk. Thank you for coming. You've saved me the trouble of sending for you. I demand the return of my daughter. She is unwell, dangerous. Your daughter, Rennick interrupted. The one you declared dead? The one whose funeral you held? The one whose inheritance you claimed? Her father faltered. Thessaly Vorn is not your concern any longer. The king rose from his chair, and though he didn't raise his voice, every word carried the weight of absolute authority. She is my betrothed. In 3 days, she will be my wife. And after that, Lord Vorn, I suggest you concern yourself with your own survival. Your Majesty, you are dismissed. The words were final, absolute. Her father's face cycled through shock, rage, and finally, a cold, calculating hatred that Thessaly knew all too well. He looked at her then, his eyes promising retribution, promising pain, promising that this was far from over, but he could not touch her, not anymore. This isn't finished, he said quietly. No, the king agreed. It isn't. But you will wish it were. Her father left. Her sister lingered a moment longer, her gaze meeting Thessaly's with something unreadable before she followed. Silence fell over the study. Thessaly realized she was shaking, her hands gripping the arms of the chair so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Breathe, the king said. He hadn't moved from his position, hadn't come to comfort her, but his voice was marginally softer than before. He cannot hurt you here. He'll find a way. Her voice cracked. He always finds a way. Then I will stop him. Rennick returned to his seat, his expression once again unreadable. Every time. For as long as it takes. Thessaly stared at him, searching for the lie, the hidden cruelty, the trap. She found nothing but cold, honest certainty. Why? She whispered. Why do you care what happens to me? The king was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than she had ever heard it. Because I know what it is to be trapped by family, to be destroyed by the people who should have protected you. His eyes met hers, and for just a moment she saw something beneath the ice, something old and wounded and carefully hidden. I cannot undo what was done to you, Lady Thessaly, but I can ensure it never happens again. He looked away, breaking the moment as cleanly as he had broken the floor of her prison. The wedding will be in 3 days, he said, his voice cold once more. I suggest you rest. You will need your strength. Thessaly rose on trembling legs and walked to the door. But before she left, she turned back. Thank you, she said softly, for being honest with me about everything. The king didn't look up from his documents. Don't thank me yet, he said again. You don't know what this marriage will cost you. The words followed her down the corridor, settling into her bones like a warning. Or perhaps, she thought, like a promise. The Cathedral of Thornhaven was older than the kingdom itself. Ancient stone arches soared toward a ceiling lost in shadow. Stained glass windows, gray with winter light, cast muted patterns across the marble floor. Candles burned in iron sconces along every wall, hundreds of them, but they did nothing to warm the vast echoing space. Thessaly stood at the entrance, her hand resting on the arm of a guard she didn't know, preparing to walk toward a man she barely understood. The gown they had dressed her in was white silk trimmed with silver, beautiful and cold, like everything in this kingdom. Her hair had been arranged in elaborate braids, threaded with tiny crystals that caught the candlelight. She looked like a queen. She felt like a ghost. The pews were packed with nobility, lords and ladies who had traveled from across Valdris to witness this impossible event. The resurrection of a dead woman. The marriage of their frozen king. Whispers followed her like shadows as she began her walk down the aisle. Is that truly her? The Vorn girl? I heard she went mad. Killed her own mother. Look how thin she is, like a corpse walking. Thessaly kept her gaze fixed straight ahead, on the altar where Rennick waited. He wore black, as she had somehow known he would, formal attire that emphasized the stark beauty of his features. His pale hair was pulled back from his face, revealing the sharp lines of his jaw, the frozen stillness of his expression. He watched her approach with those Winter Lake eyes, and she could read nothing in them. Her father sat in the front pew, positioned as if he still held some claim to her. Corisanda sat beside him, her face arranged in a smile that didn't reach her eyes. They had been given seats of honor, treated as grieving family members finally reunited with their lost daughter. The hypocrisy of it made Thessaly want to scream. But she didn't scream. She walked, one foot in front of the other, closer and closer to the man who had pulled her from the darkness. When she reached the altar, Rennick extended his hand. His fingers were cold when they closed around hers, cold as they had been in the carriage, cold as the stone walls of her prison. But his grip was steady, and when he helped her up the final step, she felt something unexpected. Safe. She felt safe. The priest began the ceremony, his voice echoing through the cathedral in solemn tones. Thessaly barely heard the words. She was too aware of Rennick beside her, of the chill radiating from his body, of the way his thumb traced a single, slow circle against her palm before going still. Had he meant to do that? Do you, Rennick Ashford, Alpha King of Valdris, take this woman as your wife, your queen, your mate? I do. His voice carried through the cathedral without effort, cold and certain. And do you, Thessaly Vorn, take this man as your husband, your king, your mate? Thessaly opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, a voice rang out from the pews. I object. The cathedral went silent. Lord Vorn rose from his seat, his face a mask of righteous concern. Forgive me, your majesty, but I cannot in good conscience allow this marriage to proceed. Rennick's expression didn't change, but Thessaly felt his hand tighten around hers. You have no authority here, Lord Vorn. I have a father's authority. Vorn's voice trembled with false emotion. My daughter is unwell. She has been unwell since childhood. The things she claims about her confinement are delusions, fantasies of a broken mind. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thessaly's pulse spiked, panic clawing at her chest. He was doing it. He was twisting the truth, making her look mad, making everyone doubt. She killed her own mother, Vorn continued, his voice rising. She was a danger to herself and others. I did what any loving father would do. I protected my family from... Enough. The single word fell like a blade. Rennick released Thessaly's hand and stepped forward, descending from the altar with slow, deliberate steps. The temperature in the cathedral dropped. Frost crept along the stone floor, spreading outward from where he stood. You claim your daughter is delusional, the king said softly, that she invented her imprisonment. Yes, your majesty, the trauma of her mother's death. Then explain the cell beneath your floor. Vorn's face went pale. Explain the chains bolted to the walls, the slot for passing food, the marks where fingernails scraped stone for years. Rennick stopped directly in front of Vorn, close enough to touch. My men have documented everything, Lord Vorn. Every detail of the prison you built for your own child. Those were storage chambers. Old construction with fresh scratches in the stone? With a mattress still warm from a body? The king tilted his head, and something in his expression made grown men flinch. You held your daughter captive for 5 years. You stole her inheritance. You committed fraud against the crown. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. And now you dare to stand in my cathedral and call her a liar? Silence. Absolute, crushing silence. Guards, Rennick said calmly. Remove Lord Vorn. He will await trial for his crimes against Lady Thessaly and against the crown. You cannot do this. Vorn lunged forward, but the guards were faster. They seized his arms, dragging him backward. She's lying. She's always been a liar. Corisanda, tell them. Tell them what your sister really is. All eyes turned to the younger daughter. Corisanda sat frozen in her seat, her face a mask of calculation. For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly she rose. I don't know what you mean, father, she said, her voice perfectly steady. I always believed Thessaly was dead. We all did. How could I have known otherwise? Vorn's face contorted with rage. You little... The guards dragged him from the cathedral, his curses echoing off the ancient stones until the doors slammed shut behind him. Thessaly stood at the altar, trembling, tears streaming down her face. She didn't know when she had started crying. She didn't know how to stop. Rennick returned to her side. He didn't touch her, didn't offer comfort, but he positioned his body between her and the watching crowd, shielding her from their stares. The ceremony will continue, he announced, unless anyone else wishes to object. Silence. I thought not. He turned back to her, and for just a moment, something softened in those frozen eyes. Breathe, he murmured, too quiet for anyone else to hear. It's almost over, Thessaly breathed. The priest resumed the ceremony with shaking hands. When it came time for her vows, her voice cracked, but the words came out. I do. By the authority vested in me, the priest said, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may claim your mate. The verbal claiming. Thessaly knew it was necessary, knew the physical claiming would come later in private. But when Rennick spoke the words, they resonated through her with unexpected force. I claim you as mine, my wife, my queen, my mate. Her wolf, dormant for so long, stirred at the declaration. Not the snap of a true mate bond, not yet, but something awakening. Something responding to his voice, his presence, his protection. I claim you as mine, she echoed. My husband, my king, my mate. Rennick took her hand again, lifting it to his lips. The kiss was brief, formal, his mouth cold against her knuckles. But when he looked at her over their joined hands, she saw something in his expression that made her breath catch. Satisfaction. He had protected her, destroyed her father publicly, and he was pleased. Come, he said, tucking her hand into the crook of his arm. Your subjects are waiting. They walked down the aisle together, past the stunned nobility, past her sister's unreadable face, past the doors where her father had been dragged away screaming. And for the first time in 5 years, Thessaly walked into the light without fear. The wedding feast passed in a blur of faces and voices and food that Thessaly couldn't taste. She sat beside the king at the high table, accepted congratulations from nobles whose names she couldn't remember, smiled until her face ached. Through it all, Rennick remained beside her, cold and watchful, deflecting conversations when she grew overwhelmed, ensuring her wine glass was never empty. He wasn't warm, he wasn't affectionate, but he was present, and that was more than she had ever expected. When the feast finally ended and the guests departed, a servant escorted her to the royal chambers. Not her previous rooms in the guest wing, but the queen's suite, connected to the king's chambers by a single door. The rooms were beautiful. Rich fabrics in deep blues and silvers, a massive bed draped in furs, a fireplace already burning with a roaring fire. But all Thessaly could focus on was that door. Behind it was her husband, and beyond it lay the wedding night. She had known this was coming, had prepared herself for it, or tried to. The contract required an heir, and heirs required consummation. It was simple, transactional. She could survive it. But her hands wouldn't stop shaking. The maids helped her out of her wedding gown and into a nightdress of thin white silk. They brushed out her hair until it fell in soft waves down her back. They asked if she needed anything else, and when she shook her head, they left. Thessaly sat on the edge of the bed, her hands clasped in her lap, waiting. She didn't have to wait long. A soft knock came at the connecting door. Before she could respond, it opened, and Rennick stepped inside. He had changed from his formal clothes into something simpler. Dark trousers, a loose white shirt unlaced at the throat. His pale hair was unbound, falling around his face in a way that made him look younger, less like a king. He closed the door behind him and stopped. "You're afraid?" he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Thessaly admitted. There was no point in lying. He could probably smell it on her. Rennick didn't move closer. "You spent 5 years in darkness, alone, helpless." His voice was soft, clinical, as if he were diagnosing an illness. "This room is bright. You are not alone. You are not helpless. But your body doesn't know the difference yet." She stared at him. "How do you know that?" "Because fear doesn't listen to logic." He moved toward the fireplace, his back to her. "I'm going to extinguish the candles. Would that help?" The question surprised her. She hadn't expected consideration, hadn't expected him to notice her fear, let alone try to accommodate it. Yes, I think so." One by one, the candles went out. Rennick moved through the room with quiet efficiency until only the firelight remained, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Then he extinguished that too. Darkness fell, but it was different this time. Not the crushing blackness of her prison, but something softer, gentler. She could hear the wind outside the windows, could smell pine and frost and that strange cold scent that was uniquely him. "Better?" His voice came from somewhere nearby. "Yes." Her voice was steadier than she expected. "Thank you." She heard him approach, felt the temperature drop as his body drew near. When his hand found hers in the darkness, his fingers were like ice. "You're so cold," she whispered. A pause. "I know." "Why?" Another pause. Longer this time. "That's not a question I can answer tonight." She wanted to push, wanted to understand, but his thumb had begun tracing slow circles against her palm, and the sensation scattered her thoughts. "I'm going to touch you now," he said quietly. "Tell me if you want me to stop." "I won't want you to stop." "You don't know that." "No," she admitted. "But I know I'm tired of being afraid." His hands rose to her shoulders, settling there with gentle pressure. His fingers were cold against her skin, but somehow the chill didn't feel unpleasant. It felt grounding, real. He slid the straps of her nightgown down slowly, giving her time to protest. She didn't. The silk whispered down her body, pooling at her feet. The darkness was complete. She couldn't see him, couldn't see herself, and couldn't see anything. There was only sensation, his cold hands moving across her skin, his breath against her throat, the frost that seemed to spread wherever he touched. "You're warm," he murmured against her collarbone. "So warm. Is that bad?" "No." The word came out rough, strained. "It's good. Too good." His mouth found the curve of her neck, and Thessaly gasped at the contrast. His lips were cold, but the sensation that shot through her was pure heat. Her hands found his chest, fumbling with the buttons of his shirt, needing to touch him the way he was touching her. His skin was like marble, cold and smooth, and impossibly beautiful beneath her fingertips. She traced the planes of his chest, the ridges of his stomach, and felt him shudder. Thessaly. Her name on his lips was a warning and a plea. "Don't stop," she whispered. "Please don't stop." He lifted her as if she weighed nothing, carrying her to the bed, laying her down with a care that made her throat tight. When his body covered hers, she expected to feel crushed, trapped, panicked. Instead, she felt sheltered. His coldness sank into her warmth. Her warmth rose to meet his coldness. And somewhere in between, they found a rhythm that felt like breathing, like existing, like finally being alive after years of merely surviving. It hurt at first. She had expected that. But he was patient, so patient, murmuring words she couldn't quite hear, giving her time to adjust, to accept, to want. And eventually, she did want. She wanted with an intensity that surprised her, wanted him closer, deeper, wanted to lose herself in the darkness and the cold and the strange, impossible man who had pulled her from her grave. When it was over, they lay tangled together, both trembling. His arm was wrapped around her waist, his chest pressed against her back, his breath cool against her neck. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Yes." She turned in his arms, facing him even though she couldn't see him. "Are you?" A soft, surprised sound escaped him, almost a laugh. "No one has ever asked me that before. That doesn't answer my question." Silence stretched between them. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. "I don't know." She felt him pull away, heard him dressing in the darkness. She expected him to leave, expected the coldness to return to more than just his body. But instead of leaving, his footsteps returned to the bed. His lips brushed her forehead in a kiss so gentle it made her eyes sting. "Sleep," he murmured. "You're safe now." She heard the connecting door open and close, and Thessaly lay alone in the darkness, her body still humming with sensation, wondering why a kiss on the forehead felt more intimate than anything else they had done. The days that followed were strange and wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. Thessaly had expected her husband to keep his distance now that the marriage was consummated. He had been clear about the terms: contractual, distant, and loveless. She would give him an heir, and beyond that, they would have nothing to do with each other. But Rennick didn't keep his distance. He appeared at her chambers each morning to escort her to breakfast. He joined her in the library during the afternoons when she was reading. He asked her opinion on matters of state, actually listened to her answers, and sometimes implemented her suggestions without comment. And every night, without fail, he came to her bed. "This is about the heir," Thessaly told herself after the first week. "He wants to ensure conception quickly." But that didn't explain why he stayed longer each night. Didn't explain the conversations that stretched past midnight, the quiet confessions shared in the darkness. Didn't explain the way his hands had begun to linger, the way his kisses had become less perfunctory and more searching. "Tell me about your mother," he said one night, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. Thessaly tensed. "Why?" Because your father accused you of killing her. I want to know what actually happened. She was quiet for a long moment, wrestling with memories she had buried alongside everything else. I was 12 when she died, she finally said. There was a fire in her chambers. They said she fell asleep with a candle burning, that the curtains caught and the smoke killed her before anyone could reach her. But you don't believe that. My mother never slept with candles burning. She was terrified of fire. Thessaly stared into the darkness, seeing flames that had haunted her dreams for 13 years. I was the one who found her, the one who tried to save her. The smoke. It did something to me. I was unconscious for days. When I woke up, my father was already telling everyone I had started the fire, that I had always been disturbed. Dangerous. You were 12. Yes. And he blamed you for your mother's death. He needed someone to blame. Her voice was hollow. Later, I realized he needed a reason to keep me controlled, to make everyone believe I was unstable, to ensure no one would listen if I ever spoke against him. Rennick was silent for so long that Thessaly thought he had fallen asleep. Then his arm tightened around her waist, pulling her closer against his cold chest. He will pay, he said quietly, for all of it. I promise you that. The conviction in his voice made her chest ache. Weeks passed. The days grew shorter, the nights longer, and still Rennick came to her chambers every evening. He arrived earlier now, sometimes before dinner, eating with her in her private sitting room before taking her to bed. The servants whispered. Thessaly heard them sometimes, caught fragments of conversation when they didn't know she was listening. He's never been like this with anyone. Do you think he actually cares for her? The king doesn't care for anyone. Everyone knows that. But Thessaly was beginning to wonder if everyone was wrong. She had started to notice things about him. The way his scent shifted when he was pleased, the frost giving way to something almost warm. The way his eyes followed her across rooms, tracking her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. The way he touched her now, not just with cold efficiency, but with something approaching reverence. And there was his condition. His coldness. It was getting worse. She first noticed it when she woke in the middle of the night to find him shivering beside her, his skin so cold it burned to touch. She had piled blankets on top of him, stoked the fire until the room was sweltering, and watched in horror as frost formed on his eyelashes despite the heat. It's nothing, he said when she asked. A family condition, it comes and goes. It's getting worse. You're imagining things. But she wasn't imagining the blue tinge that sometimes crept into his lips. Wasn't imagining the way he flinched from warmth now, as if it pained him. Wasn't imagining the healers who came and went with increasingly worried expressions. Something was wrong with her husband, and he refused to tell her what. One evening, she found him in his study, slumped over his desk, unconscious. His skin was so cold that touching him felt like touching ice. His lips were blue. His breathing was shallow, barely there. Rennick! She shook him frantically. Rennick, wake up! His eyes fluttered open. For a moment they were unfocused, confused. Then he saw her face and something flickered in his expression. Relief. You're here, he murmured. Of course I'm here. What's happening to you? Tell me the truth. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he reached up and touched her face. His fingers left trails of frost on her cheek. There's something I need to tell you, he said quietly. Something I should have told you before we married. Thessaly's breath caught. Then tell me. Not here. Tonight. In our chambers. His eyes searched her face and she saw something in them she had never seen before. Fear. Whatever it is, she said fiercely, we'll face it together. His smile was sad, so sad it made her want to weep. You shouldn't make promises you can't keep, little wolf. That night, Thessaly sat by the fire in the royal chambers, waiting. The flames burned high and hot, but she still felt cold. Afraid. Certain that whatever Rennick was about to tell her would change everything. The connecting door opened. He walked in slowly, as if every step cost him something. He looked worse than he had in the study, his skin nearly translucent, his eyes too bright, the frost spreading visibly from his fingertips up his wrists. "Sit with me," she said, patting the space beside her on the settee. He sat, but kept his distance. His hands were clasped tightly in his lap, and she noticed ice crystals forming between his fingers. "Before I tell you this," he said quietly, "I need you to understand something. When I took you from your father's estate, when I offered you marriage, I wasn't being entirely honest about my reasons. I know. You needed me to legitimize your claim to my father's territories. Yes, but that wasn't the only reason." He turned to look at her, and his eyes were filled with something she couldn't name. "I chose you because I thought you would be safe." "Safe from what?" "From me." He laughed bitterly. "From what I am. From what I'm becoming." Thessaly reached for his hand without thinking. The cold burned her palm, but she didn't let go. "Tell me," she said. "Tell me everything." And in the firelight, with frost creeping up his arms and his breath misting in the warm air, the Alpha King finally told her the truth. "I am dying," he said. "I have been dying since I was 19 years old, and there is nothing in this world that can save me." Thessaly felt her heart stop. "No," she whispered. But even as she denied it, she could see it now. The coldness spreading, the frost consuming. The King of Winter slowly turning to ice before her eyes. Thessaly didn't release his hand. The frost bit into her palm, numbing her fingers, but she held on as if letting go would mean losing him forever. "Tell me everything," she said, "from the beginning." Rennick stared at the fire, the flames reflecting in his frozen eyes. "When I was 19, I challenged my uncle for the throne. He had declared himself king after my father's death, and he was destroying the kingdom. Corruption, cruelty, endless wars that benefited no one but his allies." His jaw tightened. "I defeated him in combat, killed him with my own hands, and as he lay dying, he laughed." "Why?" "Because he knew what awaited me." Rennick's voice was hollow. "There is a curse on our bloodline, cast generations ago by a witch who was wronged by an ancient Ashford king. Every king who sits on the throne of Valdris slowly freezes from within. Our hearts turn to ice. Our blood stops flowing. Eventually, we become statues, frozen forever in whatever moment the curse completes." Thessaly's free hand flew to her mouth. "How long do you have?" "I don't know. My uncle survived 20 years with the curse because he was careful. He never allowed himself to feel anything deeply. No attachments, no emotions. The curse feeds on feeling." His eyes finally met hers, and the pain in them was devastating. "The more you feel, the faster it spreads." Understanding crashed over her like a wave. "That's why you said you would never love me." "Yes. That's why you chose someone you couldn't see, someone you thought you couldn't know." "Yes." His voice cracked. "I thought if I married a stranger, kept her at a distance, produced an heir quickly, I could live long enough to secure the succession. Long enough to ensure the kingdom wouldn't fall into chaos after my death." "But you didn't keep your distance?" Thessaly's voice trembled. "You came to me every night. You talked to me. You held me." "I know. You're dying because of me." "No." Rennick turned to her fully, gripping her hands despite the pain it clearly caused her. "I'm dying because for the first time in my life, I found something worth dying for." Tears spilled down Thessaly's cheeks, freezing against her skin where his touch had left frost. "You can't mean that." "I mean every word." His thumb traced her cheekbone, leaving a trail of ice crystals. "I have tried so hard not to feel anything for you. I have reminded myself every single day that this was a contract, an arrangement, a political necessity, but you made it impossible. How? By being brave when you had every reason to be broken, by being kind when the world had shown you nothing but cruelty, by looking at me, this frozen, dying monster, and seeing someone worth touching. His forehead dropped to hers, and his breath misted between them. I love you, Thessaly. I have loved you since the moment I pulled you from that pit, and you looked at me with those eyes full of terror and hope. I love you, and that love is killing me, and I would not change a single moment of it. No. Thessaly was sobbing now, gripping his face with both hands. No, there has to be a way. A cure. Something. There's nothing. I won't accept that. You don't have a choice. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, each kiss colder than the last. But I needed you to know, before the end. I needed you to know that you were loved, that you are loved, that whatever happens, you are never just a contract to me. How long? She demanded. How long do we have? He was silent. Rennick. How long? Days. He admitted quietly. Perhaps hours. Confessing to you. Admitting what I feel. It's accelerating everything. As if to prove his point, a violent shudder racked his body. His eyes rolled back. His hands, still gripping hers, went rigid. Rennick. He collapsed against her, his weight bearing them both down to the floor. Thessaly caught him, cradling his head in her lap, screaming for help that felt impossibly far away. His skin was turning blue. Frost spread across his chest, visible through the thin fabric of his shirt. His heartbeat, when she pressed her hand against it, was slowing, barely there. Don't leave me, she begged. Please don't leave me. I just found you. I can't lose you now. His lips moved. She leaned closer, straining to hear. Worth it, he breathed. You were worth it. His eyes closed, and the Alpha King of Valdris went still in her arms. The healers came. They swarmed the chambers with their herbs and their chanting and their useless medicines. They worked through the night while Thessaly watched from the corner, her arms wrapped around herself, her entire body shaking with sobs she could no longer control. None of it helped. By dawn, Rennick lay in the center of the great bed, covered in furs and surrounded by warming stones, and still the frost crept across his skin. His lips were blue. His fingers were crystallizing at the tips. His heartbeat was so faint that even the healers had to press their ears directly to his chest to confirm it still existed. There's nothing more we can do, Your Majesty, the chief healer said, his face gray with exhaustion and grief. The curse is beyond our knowledge, beyond anyone's knowledge. Then find someone whose knowledge is sufficient. Thessaly's voice was raw, barely recognizable. Find a witch, a sorcerer, someone who understands this magic. Witchcraft has been banned in Valdris for, I don't care what's been banned. She surged to her feet, and something inside her snapped. Heat flooded through her body, so intense that the healers stumbled backward. Find someone who can help him, or I will burn this entire kingdom to the ground searching myself. The fire in the hearth roared, flames leaping impossibly high, licking toward the ceiling. The warming stones around Rennick's bed began to glow red. The healers fled, screaming about demons and witchcraft. Thessaly stood in the center of it all, staring at her hands. They were glowing, not with reflected light, but with actual fire, dancing beneath her skin, visible through her flesh like embers in a dying coal. The binding had shattered. Years of neglect had weakened it, and the proximity to her true mate, combined with the raw desperation of this moment, had finally broken it completely. What? She whispered. So, a voice said from the doorway. You finally manifested fully. I wondered how long it would take. Thessaly spun. Corisanda stood there, her beautiful face twisted with an expression Thessaly had never seen before. Not the cold calculation she usually wore, but something rawer, something almost like guilt. What are you talking about? The fire, sister. Corisanda stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. The fire that's been burning inside you since you were born, the fire that killed our mother, the fire that father was so desperate to contain. Thessaly's blood went cold despite the heat coursing through her veins. I didn't kill our mother. No, you didn't. Corisanda's voice was quiet. But you could have saved her. And father couldn't allow that. What do you mean? Mother was like you, a fire witch, one of the most powerful in generations. Corisanda moved toward the bed where Rennick lay, looking down at his frozen face with an unreadable expression. Father didn't know until after they were married. When he discovered the truth, he was horrified, disgusted. He demanded she bind her powers, hide what she was, and never use magic again. She agreed? She loved him. Or thought she did. Corisande laughed bitterly. But then you were born. And when your powers began to manifest, Mother wanted to train you, wanted to embrace what you were. Father refused. They argued constantly. And then one night, Thessaly's stomach turned. He killed her. He locked her in her chambers and set the fire himself, made it look like an accident. Corisanda's hands clenched at her sides. You were supposed to die too. You were in the room with her when it started. But somehow, you survived. Your fire magic protected you, even though you didn't know how to use it. I was unconscious for days. Because using that much power nearly killed you. Father told everyone you started the fire that you were dangerous, unstable. It gave him the perfect excuse to have your powers bound by a witch he kept imprisoned in the dungeons. It gave him control over you forever. Thessaly's mind reeled. Her father had killed her mother, had tried to kill her, had bound her magic and buried her alive, and let the world believe she was dead. Why are you telling me this now? Corisanda finally looked at her, and there were tears in her eyes. Because I knew, she whispered. I've always known. I was 8 years old when father made me watch him kill mother. He told me if I ever spoke of it, he would do the same to me. He told me if I ever helped you, ever showed you kindness, ever breathed a word of the truth. She choked on a sob. I was a coward, Thessaly. I let him destroy you because I was afraid he would destroy me. Thessaly should have felt rage, should have felt betrayal. Instead, she felt only exhaustion, and beneath that, a terrible, desperate hope. My magic, she said slowly. Fire magic. Could it counter ice? Corisanda's eyes widened. The curse. The king's curse is ice-based. Yes. I don't know. I'm not a witch. But Mother's journals might… She stopped, her face going pale. Father burned them. After she died. He burned everything. Everything? Almost everything. Corisanda hesitated. There's one book. Mother gave it to me before she died. Told me to hide it. Never let father find it. I never understood why she chose me instead of you, but now… She took a shaky breath. I have it. Hidden in my chambers at the estate. If there's anything that can help, it would be in there. Thessaly looked at her husband's frozen form, looked at her sister's tear-streaked face, looked at her own hands, still glowing faintly with inner fire. Then we need to get it, she said. Now, before it's too late. Father is imprisoned, but his men still control the estate. They won't let us… I am the Queen of Valdris. Thessaly straightened, and the fire inside her burned brighter. I am a fire witch, daughter of a fire witch, and I will not let anyone stand between me and saving my mate. Corisande stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, she nodded. Then let us burn through anyone who tries to stop us. The Vorn estate loomed against the gray winter sky, its windows dark, its grounds eerily silent. Thessaly dismounted from her horse, flanked by a dozen of the king's guards and her sister. The journey had taken 3 hours. 3 hours during which her husband lay frozen and dying, his heartbeat growing weaker with every moment that passed. She didn't have time for diplomacy. "Open the gates," she commanded. The guards at the entrance shifted nervously. These were her father's men, loyal to the Vorn name, not the crown. "Lady Thessaly," one of them began, "we have orders not to—" She raised her hand. Fire erupted from her palm, a roaring column of flame that shot 20 feet into the air. The guards scrambled backward, their faces white with terror. "Open the gates." They opened the gates. Thessaly strode through the courtyard where she had once played as a child, past the gardens her mother had tended, toward the east wing where Corasande's chambers lay. Servants scattered before her, whispers following in her wake. The dead daughter returned. The Queen of Fire. The witch. She didn't care what they called her. She cared only about the book, the knowledge, the chance to save Rennick before his heart stopped forever. "This way." Corisande led her down a narrow corridor, to a door hidden behind a tapestry. Inside was a small room, barely bigger than a closet, filled with childhood keepsakes and forgotten treasures. And there, in a box beneath the floorboards, was a leather-bound journal embossed with symbols Thessaly didn't recognize. "Mother's grimoire," Corisande breathed. "I never dared to read it. I was too afraid." Thessaly opened it with shaking hands. The pages were filled with her mother's handwriting, cramped and hurried, detailing spells and rituals and histories of fire magic. She flipped through desperately, searching for anything about ice, about curses, about saving someone consumed by winter. And then she found it. A passage about the Ashford curse, about the witch who had cast it generations ago, binding the kings of Valdris to eternal frost. But there was more. "The curse can be broken," Thessaly read aloud, her voice trembling. "By fire freely given. Not fire of destruction, but fire of love. The warmth of a true mate, channeled through unbound magic, can melt the ice that consumes the heart. Fire freely given. Fire of love." She had the fire. She had the love. But there was a final note, scrawled in the margin in different ink, as if added later. "Warning. The fire giver will not survive. To melt the ice, she must burn herself to ash." Thessaly's hands went still. "No," Corisande whispered, reading over her shoulder. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Thessaly's voice was calm, far calmer than she felt. "Mother knew. That's why she gave you the book instead of me. She knew that one day I might need to make this choice, and she didn't want me to hesitate. You can't. Thessaly, you can't sacrifice yourself. Watch me. He wouldn't want this. The king wouldn't want you to die for him. The king doesn't get to decide." Thessaly closed the book, holding it against her chest. "He saved me. He pulled me from the darkness when no one else would. He loved me when he knew it would kill him. He gave me everything, Corisande. Everything." Her voice faltered. "The least I can do is return the favor." Before Corisande could argue further, footsteps echoed down the corridor. Slow, deliberate, accompanied by the tap of a walking cane. "I knew you'd come back eventually," Lord Vorn said, stepping into the doorway. His face was bruised from his arrest, his clothing disheveled, but his eyes burned with familiar hatred. "I knew you'd lead them straight to her secrets." "How did you escape?" Corisande demanded. "Did you really think a few prison guards could hold me, in my own territory?" He laughed. "I have allies everywhere, daughter. Allies who understand that witches must be controlled, must be contained, must be destroyed." His eyes fixed on Thessaly. "You should have died in that pit," he said softly. "I should have let you starve, instead of keeping you alive as insurance." "Insurance against what?" "Against exactly this moment." He gestured, and armed men flooded the corridor behind him. "The Ashford king was always going to die from his curse. I had planned to seize power in the chaos following his death, but then he found you, married you, made you queen." His lip curled. You were supposed to be my leverage, my puppet on the throne. Instead, you became his salvation. You knew, Thessaly breathed. You knew my fire could cure him. Of course I knew. The witch I kept in my dungeons told me everything before she died. About the curse, about fire magic, about the cure. I was saving you for myself. A bargaining chip to control whoever sat on the throne. He stepped closer, and his voice dropped to a venomous whisper. Your mother's bloodline is the only thing in existence that can break the Ashford curse, but you ruined everything. You killed my mother for this, imprisoned me for this, destroyed our family for this. I did what was necessary. His eyes were empty, soulless. I always do what's necessary. Thessaly looked at the man who had stolen her life, murdered her mother, tortured her for power he would never possess, and she felt nothing but pity. You're pathetic, she said quietly. You destroyed everyone who ever loved you, and for what? A throne you'll never sit on? Power you'll never hold? I will hold it. Once you're dead and the king follows you. The king will live. Thessaly raised her hands and fire exploded outward, knocking the armed men backward, creating a wall of flame between herself and her father. And you will rot in a cell for the rest of your miserable life. She turned to Corisanda. Get the guards. Have him arrested properly this time. Use the king's personal guard. No one loyal to our father. What about you? Thessaly clutched the grimoire to her chest and ran. The ride back to Thornhaven was the longest of Thessaly's life. Every moment that passed was a moment Rennick's heart grew weaker. Every mile felt like 10. The grimoire burned against her chest like a brand, its secrets searing into her consciousness. She would save him. She would burn for him, and she would not let herself regret it. When she finally burst through the doors of the royal chambers, the scene that greeted her made her heart stop. Rennick was encased in ice, not just frost anymore, but actual ice, clear and crystalline, spreading from his chest outward to cover his entire body. His face was frozen in an expression of peace, as if he had simply fallen asleep, as if he had simply given up. No. Thessaly stumbled toward the bed. No, 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 I'm not too late. I can't be too late. She pressed her hand against the ice and it burned, cold so intense it felt like fire. But she didn't pull away. She pushed harder, channeling every ounce of heat inside her. Every spark of the magic she had spent her entire life suppressing. The ice hissed, steam rose, but it didn't melt. Please, she sobbed. Please, I need more time. I need... The grimoire. She tore it open, finding the page about the curse, reading the instructions with desperate eyes. Fire freely given, fire of love, the warmth of a true mate. She had all of those things, but she needed to channel them properly, needed to let go of everything holding her back. Thessaly closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, of the love that had burned so bright it frightened her father into murder. She thought of the years in the darkness, the despair that had nearly consumed her, the moment when Rennick's hand had reached down into her pit and offered her something she had stopped believing in: hope. She thought of his cold hands on her skin, his voice in the darkness, the way he had looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, with so much longing and love and fear. She thought of his confession, his tears, his final words. You were worth it. You were worth it too, she whispered. You are worth everything. And she let go. The fire didn't come from her hands this time. It came from everywhere, from her heart, her soul, her very essence. It poured out of her in waves of golden light, washing over the ice, sinking into the frozen form of her husband. The ice began to melt. Water streamed down the sides of the bed, pooling on the floor, evaporating into steam that filled the chamber. Thessaly kept pushing, kept burning, kept giving everything she had. Her vision blurred. Her body felt light. insubstantial, as if she were dissolving into the flame. This is it, she thought. This is how it ends. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Not until the ice was gone, not until his heart was beating, not until… Thessaly! The voice was hoarse, broken, impossible. She opened her eyes. Rennick was sitting up. His skin was flushed with color. His eyes were open, blue-gray and alive and filled with horror. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "Stop, Thessaly, stop. I can't." Her voice sounded distant, even to herself. "If I stop, the curse will come back." "I don't care about the curse." He lunged for her, his hands closing around her wrists. His touch was warm, warm for the first time since she had known him. "You're dying. I can see it. You're burning yourself alive. That's how it works." She smiled, and even that small movement felt like too much effort. Fire freely given. Fire of love. "No." He was crying, tears streaming down his face, and she had never seen anything so beautiful. "I won't let you die for me. I won't." "You don't get to decide." She echoed her own words from earlier, the words she had said to Corisanda. "I love you, Rennick. I choose this. I choose you. Please." His voice broke completely. "Please, there has to be another way." Thessaly looked at him through fading vision, at his desperate face, his clutching hands, his heart beating strong and healthy in his chest. She had done it. She had saved him. Now she just needed to let go. But something was wrong. The fire wasn't consuming her anymore. It was flowing between them, back and forth. A circuit of warmth that connected them like a golden thread. "What?" she breathed. "The mate bond." Rennick's eyes widened with sudden understanding. "It completed. When you gave yourself for me, it completed the bond." "I don't understand." "You're not just giving fire to me. I'm giving something back." He pulled her closer, pressing his forehead to hers. "Life. Warmth. Everything I have. Everything I am." The golden light between them pulsed, steadied, balanced. Thessaly felt strength flowing back into her limbs, felt her heart, which had been slowing, begin to beat strongly again, felt the fire inside her settle into something sustainable, something shared. "The curse," she whispered. "Is it gone?" Rennick closed his eyes, searching inside himself for something only he could sense. "Yes," he said finally. "It's gone. Not just suppressed. Broken. Completely." "How?" "Because the curse was meant to be broken by sacrifice, but it wasn't your sacrifice alone." He opened his eyes and they were filled with wonder. "It was both of us. Giving everything for each other. Meeting in the middle. That's what true mates do." 6 months later, Thessaly stood in the gardens of Thornhaven, watching spring arrive in Valdris for the first time in living memory. The eternal winter that had gripped the kingdom since the curse began was finally lifting. Flowers bloomed where only frost had grown. Birds returned to trees that had stood bare for generations. The people spoke of it as a miracle. They weren't entirely wrong. "Your Majesty." Corisanda approached with a bow that still felt strange coming from her sister. "The council is ready for you." Thessaly nodded. The council meetings had become a regular part of her life, now that she ruled alongside Rennick as a true queen, not just a political convenience. So much had changed since that night in the royal chambers. Her father had been tried and executed for murder, treason, and conspiracy against the crown. The evidence Corisanda had provided, combined with testimony from servants and guards who had finally found the courage to speak, had been overwhelming. Corisanda herself had been pardoned for her silence, given a seat on the council, and charged with reforming the treatment of magical practitioners throughout the kingdom. She took to the work with a fervor that surprised everyone except Thessaly. Guilt, it turned out, was a powerful motivator. The ban on witchcraft had been lifted entirely. A new academy was being built to train young magic users, to give them the guidance and control that Thessaly had never received. The fire witches of her mother's bloodline were being sought out, honored instead of hunted. And Thessaly herself. "You're glowing again," Rennick said, appearing beside her with a warm smile that still made her heart skip. She looked down at her hands, where faint embers danced beneath her skin. "I can't help it. I'm happy." "Happy?" He pulled her into his arms, and his body was warm against hers, warm as any normal wolf, warm as he had never been before they broke the curse. Just happy? Deliriously, impossibly, ridiculously happy. She rose on her toes to kiss him. "Is that better?" "Much." They stood together in the garden, surrounded by new growth and new beginnings, and Thessaly thought about the journey that had brought them here. She had been declared dead, buried alive, forgotten by the world. And then a frozen king had heard her heartbeat beneath the floor and decided that she was worth saving. "I love you," she said, because she could now, because saying it wouldn't kill him, because they had forever to say it as many times as they wanted. "I love you too." Rennick pressed a kiss to her hair. "My queen. My mate. My salvation." "That's what true mates do," she reminded him. "Yes." His arms tightened around her. "It is." Somewhere in the distance a bird sang, and in the kingdom of Valdris, spring had finally come.